With you all today. All right, and hopefully you're able to see my screen now.
That's fine, yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So I'm going to be focusing this talk on remote sensing of forest biomass and structure, particularly from NASA's Global Ecosystem Dynamics Investigation mission, which is a satellite LiDAR that I'm involved with. So I'm giving this talk on behalf of a large number of collaborators and co-authors. A few of them who have particularly given slides or figures for the slides are listed here, but there are many, many others who have been involved. And I'm sure several of the folks in the audience as well. So I wanted to quickly take us back. Let me put a little laser pointer on here to why we're bothering to do remote sensing of forest structure and biomass. So this is a few years old now, but the basic schematic from the Global Carbon Project showing how much carbon is stored in the atmosphere and the general stocks and fluxes, and the uncertainties on these estimates of change are largest for emissions from land use change. So from forest fires, deforestation, degradation, our uncertainties about how much carbon is being emitted from that part of the global carbon cycle are higher than our uncertainties for any other part of this puzzle. And the reason that they're so high is because when we can see from space quite clearly now when we lose forest, when we have deforestation, to some degree when we have degradation, we can see fires from space, but we didn't know how much carbon was there to begin with. And that's sort of this critical carbon knowledge gap that we as a remote sensing community are hoping to fill. But ultimately, our biomass products are hoping to reduce this uncertainty here, and hopefully people will also use those to start managing forests a little bit better so that we can actually reduce the emissions from the forest sector. All right, so that's where GEDI comes in. We have never had a really good, reliable forest biomass product at a global scale because we've never had good technology in space designed to do this. I think a lot of researchers have put out products with kind of suboptimal data sets. It's the best you could do with technology that wasn't really designed for this purpose. So GEDI is the first satellite mission that's really designed specifically for forest structure and biomass. And so forgive me here, but I'm going to play a short promotional video about the GEDI mission. All right, so may the forest be with you is our super nerdy Star Wars slogan. So of course, Jedi is spelled with a G, but pronounced like a la Star Wars. And this was a promotional video a few years back. And this was Coming Soon, the Jedi Mission, this joint production of the University of Maryland and NASA Goddard. But now Jedi is here, it's with us. And it's collecting great data, and the coming soon part is now the biomass products. So we do a lot of sort of nerdy Star Wars jokes, and you'll have to forgive me for playing that. And here we are also looking rather nerdy at the very exciting GEDI launch. So this was almost exactly 2 years ago tomorrow, which feels crazy that 2 years has flown by. The last year has felt very strange for all of us. But this is when we were still able to travel, and we went to a very exciting SpaceX launch of GEDI up to the International Space Station. All right. So here's a more scientific animation showing what the mission is. So as I said, GEDI's on the International Space Station, so it's not on its own satellite. It's sort of renting space in space rather than buying. And so on the International Space Station, there's this wing called the Japanese Experimental Modules Exposed Facility. And GEDI is essentially a refrigerator-sized box that's plugged into the ISS. And it has 3 infrared lasers. One of them is split into 2 beams. So it has 4 beams hitting the ground. And those are optically dithered back and forth to make 8 ground tracks. So GEDI samples in these 8 ground tracks under the ISS, shooting near-infrared LiDAR beams, full waveform LiDAR. And so you can see a wash of near-infrared photons hitting the top of a canopy. And the time that's elapsed between when you shoot the laser pulse from the ISS and when that laser pulse reflects off the ground and returns back gives you the distance from the ISS to the ground. And then the difference in time between when these first photons reflect back off the top of the canopy and the last photons reflect off the ground gives you the maximum canopy height. And then this orange squiggle here is a full waveform. So this is the actual observation that GEDI makes is a waveform LiDAR observation. So it gives you not only that maximum height, the ground elevation, the height of the canopy, but also the three-dimensional distribution of material in each of these shots. So each laser beam illuminates about a 25-meter diameter circle, and the distribution of material in that 25-meter diameter circle gives you this essentially temporal histogram. So the more stuff at the top of this waveform, the sort of denser the canopy is near the top of the canopy, the more stuff in the ground, the lower the canopy cover, and you can get things like the layers of the canopy in here as well. But this is all that GEDI actually measures, right? So it produces these waveforms, and we have to use those waveforms, manipulate them to do science and release products. So for those of you who are familiar with airborne LiDAR, but you've never done anything with waveform LiDAR or GEDI before, here we have in the bottom left corner this great discrete return point cloud from airborne LiDAR, where you can see all these individual trees at really fine detail. That's not what GEDI looks like at all. So the data actually looks totally different. We really only do have these waveforms, and each of them can be thought of almost like a forest plot level, like a 25-meter forest plot where you're getting the height distribution. But the spatial distribution of foliage within those 25-meter shots, you can't resolve from GEDI. So you're not going to be able to see individual trees, but you get that trade-off between the spatial detail you would see in airborne LiDAR and the spatial coverage you get from GEDI, because of course, GEDI being a satellite instrument is giving you data at a near global scale. I say near global because the ISS does not go over the poles, but I'll talk about that in a few slides. So as I said, we launched GEDI back in December of 2018. So we're about 2 years into the mission at this point. Science data started to be collected. So it takes a little bit of time to get the thing working and calibrated once it's in space, but science data started to be collected in April of 2019. The level 1 and level 2 products are online. So the geolocated waveforms and then the elevation and canopy metrics from those waveforms, those are online. And we've got a year of data already publicly available. You can go to NASA, you can download those today. We are expecting by the end of the mission, we'll have at least 10 billion cloud-free waveform observations. We're already more than halfway there, of the land surface. So this is orders of magnitude more data than we had with ISAT's GLASS, for example. And these data sets are actually designed for forest structure, whereas for those of you familiar with ISAT GLASS, which was similar, but each laser illuminated a 65-meter diameter circle, we're going higher resolution with GEDI so that we can get better forest information without conflating the forest signal from the ground signal as much. So that's what we're expecting to get, billions of waveform observations, and we have to take these waveforms and make sense of them. So one very important aspect of using GEDI data is acknowledging that this is not a wall-to-wall mapped data set. So this isn't something like a Landsat or a Modus VIIRS product. These are samples, right? So as I said, we have 3 lasers in that refrigerator on the ISS. A refrigerator-sized box. It's not a fridge. We have 3 lasers. One of them is a coverage laser where you take the original laser and it's split into 2 beams, each of which is a little bit less than half the power of the full power beam. So it's essentially, it's splitting it so that we can get a bit more spatial coverage, but these coverage lasers are lower energy than the original full power lasers. So we've got 2 lasers that are super powerful, and then 1 laser that is split into 2, still quite powerful, but not quite as powerful as the full power laser. So we've got these 3. The coverage beams are half of the observations you get, and the full power lasers are half. So you get 4 beams hitting the Earth, and then those are optically dithered back and forth to give you these 8 ground tracks we saw in that animation. And then the spatial sampling on the ground for each of these, along one of those tracks, you get these cookie cutter 25-meter pulses spaced about every 60 meters. And then between tracks, there's about 600 meters. So that's the spatial sampling you'll get under a single ISS pass. So you will have these big gaps between these GEDI samples. This is a sample of Earth structure, not a wall-to-wall map. You can, of course, fuse it with other data streams, which I'll talk about down the road a little bit. But this is what the GEDI data will look like. So each of these circles is one of those LiDAR waveforms. Okay. And so here's some eye candy for some of the early products. Here we have the globally gridded topography. So this is the elevation of the bottom of those waveforms aggregated to a 1 kilometer level globally. And then similarly, the top of the waveforms minus that ground elevation gives you the canopy height. And here we have that globally as well. So you can see places that you expect to see the taller trees, in the Amazon basin, in the Pacific Northwest here. Of course, we are indeed seeing those taller trees. And you can zoom in and get a lot more detail. But as you can see here, you do see these sort of lines on these maps, and this is the ISS orbits. So as GEDI remains up on the space station, it's capturing more and more data, and it's starting to fill the gaps as well. So we're trying to get as many of the gaps filled by the end of the mission, and it will be up there until at least 2022, operating and firing the lasers and collecting more and more data. So we're thinking we're going to get at least 10 billion observations, but of course this will not be collecting data absolutely everywhere. There will be spatial gaps, and GEDI is a near infrared LiDAR, so it does not penetrate clouds. So in perpetually cloudy areas, you're going to have more spatial gaps than you will in relatively dry areas. So that's one consideration. But what this talk is really about is about biomass. So that's what I said was the coming soon. The elevation data, the height data, canopy metrics, those are already online. Biomass has not been released yet. We are still just finishing off the production of the biomass algorithm and associated products, but those will be coming really soon, so very early 2021. So I'll talk to you about what we do there. So it's a bit different from the elevation and the height data because those are extracted as essentially measurements from the waveform, whereas biomass is empirically derived. So way back at the beginning of this mission, when we were trying to figure out how we were going to produce biomass estimates, we realized that, well, of course, you need to calibrate biomass somehow, so you need actual field data. But we were not going to be able to run all over the world in the relatively short mission span of GEDI and collect field plots everywhere under actual GEDI waveforms. So, finding where the location of a waveform was collected, going out and collecting a small field plot. We knew that we would not be able to do that logistically in the GEDI mission. And that was before we knew that during 2020, we would essentially be doing no field work at all. So thankfully, that was not our strategy. And instead, we have worked with a group of international collaborators who have existing field data where they also have airborne LiDAR, and we make the airborne LiDAR look like GEDI. So this is our fundamental concept, is we collect pre-existing field data, both that we've collected from our lab, but mostly from international collaborators all over the world who have collected actual forest estimates of biomass on the ground, and where airborne LiDAR is coincident, both spatially and temporally, with those field collections. So we can make the airborne LiDAR look like GEDI by using a GEDI waveform simulator that was developed and published by Steve Hancock, who's now at the University of Edinburgh. But essentially, we take this point cloud and we make it look like GEDI waveforms. And then we run those GEDI waveforms through the same algorithms that our actual on-orbit products go through to fit where a ground elevation would be, to calculate the maximum height, the mean height, the distribution of foliage, etc. So we get all sorts of quantitative descriptors of these simulated GEDI waveforms. And then we build empirical models to relate those simulated metrics to the field estimates of biomass on the ground that somebody has collected. So that's what we do at a global scale. And I'll walk through some of the details on that. This is all from a paper that's still in prep. It has not come out yet, but we're hoping to get it out hopefully around the same time as the products so people can make sense of the products. Okay. So how do we actually measure the biomass in the field, right? Like that's our training data, our real training data, our forest field plot estimates of biomass. And the truth is, as many of you probably know, we don't actually measure biomass in the field. We estimate biomass by measuring trees literally hugging trees, wrapping a diameter tape around a tree, and also measuring its height often. And we apply allometric models that somebody else has developed to estimate biomass as some function of these measurable attributes of trees. So we can't coerce these trees to actually step on scales and weigh themselves in the woods. We have to rely on these allometric models. And in the entire scheme of making satellite biomass maps, these allometric models, at least in my opinion, are one of the main sources of uncertainty. And that's for many reasons. So it's very difficult to actually fell trees, especially huge trees, and to dry them out, to take them to a lab, to weigh them for their actual biomass, their actual mass, right? So it means that these allometric models have been developed with relatively small samples of trees. And typically for many geographic areas, those samples really are biased towards smaller trees, smaller, more manageable trees that you can cut down, weigh, and then you build these empirical relationships. There's also a lot more variability between these measurable attributes and biomass, the larger the tree, right? The larger the tree, the longer it's been alive, the more life history it has. So there's just a lot more natural variability, which means that our estimates of biomass just in the field, independent of any remote sensing, just in the field, our estimates of biomass increase in uncertainty the larger the trees are, the higher the biomass is, right? And so that's really, we're trying to do carbon accounting from space, but the places that have the most carbon also have the highest uncertainties. And this is an issue that the remote sensing community alone cannot tackle. So I'll get back to this near the end of the talk, but all of our GEDI biomass models are fitting models to field estimates, and we know those field estimates have large uncertainties, particularly in high biomass systems. All right, but we're not fixing that problem with GEDI. We're just accepting that that's what it is. We have allometric estimates of biomass in the field, and we relate those empirically to simulated GEDI waveforms. And then we apply those models to real GEDI waveforms. So this is our database. And so every single one of these circles is a place where we have field data, and we have airborne LiDAR that we've made to look like GEDI data. About half of it in blue is publicly available data, so data you could go online and you could download, and about half of it is not publicly available. They're wonderful collaborators who we have signed data sharing agreements with that we are not going to release their data, but they have very graciously allowed us to use their data to help us build better biomass algorithms for the mission. So you can see that we do have a lot of data all over the world, but we do have a lot of geographic data gaps. So for example, in Central Asia, we don't have any training data. So how well the GEDI algorithms are going to do in those areas where we really just don't have any training data, we're hoping that our models that are fit elsewhere will transfer well to those, but we do not have a way to assess those before those products go out. You might also see that there's this dotted line here, and we don't have any data from sort of up in the boreal, a few little places in Europe, but not much. That is simply because the GEDI mission on the ISS doesn't go over the poles. So we haven't been prioritizing places where we know that we're not going to be making a product. So we're really focusing between about 52 degrees north and south for our model development. So this is our database. If anybody who is watching this has some connections to some reference data particularly in a place that is not represented on this map, but also anywhere that seems well covered, the more high quality data we have to train our models, the better the products will be. So please do get in touch. We're always looking for new partners here. So then we take that database and we fit these empirical models. And we do this in a really data-driven way. This is work co-led by myself, Jim Kellner at Brown University, and John Armston at the University of Maryland. So we fit these. We have to kind of come up with some level of strata here. We could have fit one global universal model. We tried to do that, but there is a lot of natural variability in the relationship between LiDAR waveforms and field estimates. So we have divvied up the world into a series of strata by broad plant functional type. We only have 4 categories, so super broad, and also continent. So here we have our region map and our PFT map, which is from a Modus product. So this is for the 4 classes very broadly are evergreen broadleaf tree forests, needleleaf tree forests, deciduous broadleaf tree forests. And then this is kind of a generalized, it's grassland shrub, but it's everything that's like woodland, grassland, shrubland, stuff that doesn't fit into the other three categories. We put it into this grass shrub category. So these are very, very broad. If we had more training data, we could make these more specified, but we need something that we can apply globally. So this is the level of strata we're looking at, is both by these PFTs and by these geographic domains. So for each of these, we fit thousands, like it's really an exhaustive data fit where we fit thousands of candidate models with different variables that are being selected. So different predictors from the waveforms, different transformations. So we explore square root and log transformations of those predictors, different model parameterizations. So we fit thousands of candidates, and then we pick the best models that perform well based on their geographic cross-validation. So essentially for a given strata, we don't just like randomly take 20% of the data out for cross-validation. We take out entire geographic regions and we train the data everywhere else and we apply it to that region because we're trying to find models that are transferable outside of their geographic domain of training. So that's what we do here. We select the sort of the models that come to the top. And there's a whole suite of potential candidate models for each one of these strata, right? So from that suite, we're finding that there is some consistency in the variables that are being selected to predict biomass. So here we have a simulated GEDI waveform. And here we have a series of what we call relative height metrics, which are the height below which some proportion of the waveform energy has been returned. So RH98, it's like a percentile, but RH98 is the height below which 98% of the canopy energy has been returned. We treat that like our maximum canopy height. RH100 is a little bit more sensitive to background noise. So RH98 we treat as maximum canopy height. And then RH50 would be the height below which 50% of the waveform energy has been returned. That includes the ground signal. So RH10, for example, is the height below which 10% of the waveform energy has been returned with respect to the ground ground elevation. So you fit a ground elevation to each one of these waveforms, and then your RH metrics, your relative height metrics, are calculated with respect to that ground elevation. So your RH10 is often actually below ground, so it'll be slightly negative, and it's very sensitive to canopy cover and slope. So the more energy in the ground, the lower the canopy cover, right? Like the more laser energy that arrives at the ground, it means you have less foliage. And your RH10 is very sensitive to that canopy cover. So it'll get pulled further and further up into the canopy as you have a denser and denser canopy cover. All right, so what we're seeing for variable selection, when we fit those thousands of models per strata, we're seeing that pretty consistently, if we allow any variables to be selected, we're seeing variables describing the bottom of the waveform and variables describing the top of the waveform being selected. And I think this is really interesting. Across the 4 different broad plant functional types, we're seeing similar waveform metrics being selected. So that sort of maximum height and something about the bottom of the waveform, RH10, which I think is, it's highly sensitive to canopy cover, so almost a proxy for canopy cover. Those are being selected regardless of which one of these plant functional types you're looking at. So it does seem to be fairly consistent across these PFTs. But in general, you're getting something around max height and something that's like RH10, RH20 are being selected as predictors here. So I want to just quickly walk us through one very kind of hands-on example. So this is one of the top candidate models for South America evergreen broadleaf trees. So it's a tropical seminar, so we picked a tropical model here. So this is predicting this, it's a square root transform model, predicting the square root of biomass as a function of only 2 waveform metrics, so RH20 and RH98. These are simple parametric models, largely because we wanted to, we had a constraint on us that for our gridded product, we need to be able to propagate the uncertainties through our models to our gridded estimates. And that can be done for these parametric models, but not yet for something like a machine learning algorithm. So here, yeah, it's this very simple model, RH20 and RH98, and here's an actual on-orbit waveform from the Brazilian Amazon. So for this waveform, you fit where the bottom of, or where the ground elevation is to one of these last peaks. So this is the ground elevation. And then this green line is the foliage above that elevation. And so here, if we are picking out RH98 for this waveform is 29 meters. So that's the height below which 98% of the energy has been returned with respect to this ground elevation. And then RH20 here is 4 meters. So for this example, if you run this through and you actually estimate biomass for this waveform in South America, evergreen broadleaf trees, you're going to get an estimate of 146 tons per hectare of biomass. Okay. I won't go into like the details of that, but essentially it's a simple parametric model and this is your estimate. So that's all we do. And then we have a variance covariance matrix for this model. So you'll have an uncertainty on this estimate as well. But we essentially just repeat this like billions of times over the billions of waveforms that GEDI collects. Okay, and so here's a very quick first glimpse of the preliminary biomass product. Again, we're still refining the biomass estimates, but yeah, so this is being presented this week by the GEDI PI, Ralph Dubaya, at the AGU fall meeting. So if you want more details about the mission and this product, you can go to his talk. But these are 1 kilometer estimates of the mean and the associated standard error that includes both the modeling and the spatial sample uncertainties. And again, this will be available publicly early in 2021, but the models and the products will continue to get better through time. Okay, so I'm gonna just spend a few quick slides talking about ISAT2, which I know this is a tropical focused talk, but I'm Canadian, and so one thing that pains me is that we do have this huge data gap in the boreal. So here you see the first 2 weeks and the first 2 months of GEDI data coverage. It's getting richer and richer as we move on through time, but it's never going to be sampling north of 52 degrees. So fortunately, NASA has a second satellite LiDAR system currently operating called ISAT2, which many of you might be familiar with. This is collecting global data, so it doesn't have that boreal gap. But as you could probably guess based on the name of the mission, ISAT2 is designed for ice and topography and unfortunately watching ice sheets melt over time. But we have been using it for filling in our boreal data gap to have true global coverage. So we are going to have not only just a GEDI product, but a sort of a fused product that will fill in the boreal with ISAT2. And so this is just a quick glimpse because ISAT2 is available globally, so you can play with it over the tropics as well. This is a quick glimpse of what that data looks like. So it's a totally different type of data than GEDI. It's a photon counting green laser LiDAR system that essentially collects like a continuous super noisy point cloud that's like a strip about 11 meters wide, and it goes forever under the ISAT2 lasers. These are measuring individual photons, but along transect, you can see the ground signal and you can see the canopy signal. This is for a boreal forest in British Columbia. And so there's an associated product called ATL08 that gives you, so each of these photons is classified as either being from the ground or the canopy. And then ATL08 for every 100 meter segment along that transect gives you an estimate of relative height metrics that are forest structure metrics that you can use for height mapping and biomass as well. So we are working on a project to fill in that boreal gap with ISAT2, following very similar strategies to what we're doing for GEDI, empirical model fitting with field data and with airborne LiDAR, but applying it to ISAT2 across that boreal. So we're hoping to release a first version of this sometime early probably like in the spring of 2021. So do stay tuned to that. I know this is a tropical seminar, so I will go back to the tropics now. But quickly, with respect to ISAT2 over the tropics, if you want to just combine GEDI and ISAT2, it's kind of a natural thing to do. 2 different satellite LiDAR data streams. Is that, double the information content? Yes and no. So just a quick caveat about that. ISAT2 and GEDI both have relative height metrics in their products, but they're not apples to apples. They're not the exact same. So the way that they actually calculate those relative height metrics are different, but also the ISAT2 laser is much weaker than GEDI. So in really dense canopies, like in the tropics, oftentimes it won't actually penetrate all the way through to the ground. So if it misses the ground, it's going to really shrink the tree heights. And then also it's, if you're just trying to merge these data sets together, be aware that the ISAT2 are 100-meter segment estimates of forest structure, whereas GEDI are these sort of 25-meter samples. So you have to do a little bit of fancy remote sensing to combine these meaningfully. And I'm happy to talk on the side with anybody who's interested to do that. So we tried to essentially say like, okay, well, can we take a GEDI biomass algorithm and apply it to ISAT2 data? And this is something this is work from California, from Sonoma County, where you have really huge tall trees, high biomass region. And we found that that ISAT2 was underestimated. This is all based on simulated data, but this suggests that ISAT2 for really tall, dense forests is going to be shrinking the tree heights and therefore underestimating biomass compared to GEDI. So it's some caution. I think we need to do some refinement for using ISAT2 in places like the tropics, but there's some good potential here. Okay, so this gets us to the idea of data fusion. So obviously we're making these GEDI maps, these GEDI products, but the best products will almost undoubtedly be from a combination of different data streams. So we've got GEDI, now we've got ISAT2 as well, but already there's a lot of satellite radar data available and even more on the horizon. So from missions in this example, from NASA ISRO's NISAR, but also ESA's got a P-band SAR biomass mission going up. So there's a lot of different data streams that are very complementary, particularly LiDAR and SAR, because the radar is going to give you penetration through clouds and wall-to-wall data, whereas the LiDAR will be able to penetrate, especially for GEDI, all the way to the ground, so it won't have the same kind of saturation issues with respect to biomass. So combining LiDAR and SAR and other data streams, we envision will reduce uncertainties and give you higher resolution maps. But this is also, I'm so excited about all of the different products that I imagine, people on this call might produce, many people in our field. But we're going to have a bit of an issue that we've gone from kind of having no really good biomass maps to potentially having, dozens, maybe even hundreds starting to come online from wonderful tools such as Google Earth Engine, where anyone can make a global map from the comfort of their own home in 2020. But if we sort of start flooding the community with all these products, we're not going to know which ones we should actually be using for forest management, for policy, for science. So this is where we really need some independent assessment of any biomass product that comes online, because the maps are only really as good as the data used to train them. And we also need independent data that we can use to validate any map that comes online, so that we can kind of sort out which are the really high quality products for our particular application and which products are maybe better suited elsewhere or have some fundamental issues with them. So we're working as kind of a biomass community to try and find some funding to do independent reference data for any map that comes online. And this has largely been coordinated through the Committee on Earth Observing Satellites. Called CEOS. We've written a biomass validation protocol, which is as exciting as maybe it sounds. It's about a 200-page document that is giving guidance for map producers. So for people making biomass maps, how to estimate their uncertainties in a consistent way. Hopefully we can move the community toward using like consistent terminology, but then also for map users who want to interpret any biomass product that comes online and know which product is right for them. So this is kind of like a summary of the state of knowledge, and this document is in draft form and is actually open for public comment for another few weeks. If there's anyone who is interested in reading this through, both for education, but maybe for giving some input, please do so. But one of the main recommendations we're getting out of this is that we really do need this independent reference data set that has new field observations, but also terrestrial laser scanning and airborne LiDAR, so that we can make local airborne LiDAR biomass maps that will serve as reference, as validation maps for any product that goes online. So the idea is if you have 100 products that all of a sudden come online, you're like, woof, I only want one, which one's the right one for me? We could hopefully have some independent data set and hopefully then a tool on top of it that allows people to say, okay, out of these 20, this is the best one across the neotropics, or maybe these 5 are equally good across the neotropics, that kind of thing. So as I said, terrestrial laser scanning is a big part of this. And this kind of brings us back to something I was talking about at the beginning of this presentation about allometry. So we know that our field measurements are not actually measurements, but they're estimates, right? And they have these large errors from field measurement uncertainty, but also this allometric model uncertainty. So if you use terrestrial laser scanning, and here's our little GEDI TLS, I think that this is a really exciting complementary path forward for reference data collection, because not only are you going to take your traditional measurements of, wrapping your diameter tape around a tree, but if you have terrestrial laser scanning, you can reconstruct the entire woody volume of a tree virtually, right? So it's a much richer measurement of tree structure in the field than you're getting from these sort of simpler measurements of height and diameter. So this is a reconstruction of several sequoia trees from some work in Sonoma County led by Matt Disney in collaboration with us, where you can see the variability between tree girth, canopy, and tree height across these large trees. There's a lot of variability there, right? So diameter alone is not a good proxy for estimating biomass. So I'll just show a little bit of TLS eye candy here. These are animations from Atticus Stovall from some terrestrial laser scanning we did at CERC in Maryland. But the amount of detail you can get from TLS, which I'm sure many of you in the audience are very well aware of, but it's really quite staggering, right? You can get down to individual like tiny little branching parts of stems with terrestrial laser scanning. So hopefully we can augment the existing reference data and make those reference estimates much richer, both for training our models, which will improve our biomass maps, but also for validating any product that comes online. So this is one thing that I think is quite important and exciting. I only have a few more slides, but I wanted to now pivot. So we're making these biomass maps, but what can we do with these biomass maps? So I'm just going to give a few examples of work that we're just starting up on our end through some GEDI science team work and through some collaborations with Conservation International. But these are just tiny examples of the kind of stuff you could do with GEDI biomass estimates. So one project that we're working on right now, this is through some actual NSF funding in collaboration with Brian Enquist and folks at Conservation International and the GEDI science team. We're asking how effective are protected areas at preserving biomass. So here's a case study from Brazil, where with over 2,000 protected areas across Brazil from the IUCN, we have all of these red polygons for the protected areas. We've matched those pixels within protected areas to ecologically similar pixels outside of protected areas that have the same climate, soils, distance to human population, population density, etc. So pixels that should theoretically be the same in terms of forest structure based on everything except the fact that that there's a protected area placed on them. And then we've done a comparison looking at all of the GEDI data within protected areas compared to all the GEDI data in similar areas that just don't happen to be protected. And we found that the existence of protected areas, just the fact that you are in a protected area, the forests are 24% taller in terms of GEDI waveform observations, and with a whopping 53% higher canopy cover. So there really does seem to be a structural signal, at least in this Brazilian case study, and we are currently extending this to biomass as well. So the idea here is how much extra carbon is being stored just because of the existence of protected areas. So that's one project that we're working on right now. And then a second one that's just getting going early in next year, in January, this is my new GEDI science team project. We're kind of doing the almost inverse of the last project. So we're looking again at protected areas, but we're also making a map of global carbon hotspots. So where are all of the biggest, most carbon rich forests according to GEDI, right? And then what proportion of those fall in protected areas? And if they don't, can we point to those as places that are sort of higher conservation priority. And of course, carbon is not the only thing that's important here. There's, you know, biodiversity, there are a lot of other considerations, but this is just filling in the carbon part of that, again, through collaborations with Conservation International. And I will say, so this is a brand new project. We are looking to hire both a postdoc and a PhD student. Applications, this is a shameless plug, but applications for a PhD for this project are due on December 22nd at UMD. So these are just a few of the types of things you can do to actually try to inform forest management with GEDI data, but I'm sure many people in the audience will have other exciting things to do with it, if not already. So then I wanted to just conclude by reminding everybody that we are at this very exciting moment for remote sensing of forest structure. So here we have GEDI and ISAT-2, and these missions they're not going to just end as soon as, you know, these blue lines terminate. Hopefully these will continue on as the lasers continue firing. But we've got all of these future missions coming up, particularly in the SAR domain. So the opportunities for data fusion and applications of these LiDAR and SAR fused biomass maps are, you know, they're kind of endless. So there's a lot of exciting stuff on the horizon. So that's all I had. I want to quickly thank everybody who has been involved, especially with helping provide reference data for building up the biomass algorithms for GEDI. Without those data sets, really, we wouldn't have a high quality product coming to you soon. And you can follow GEDI at the extremely nerdy GEDI Twitter handle at GEDI Nights, and there's my Twitter handle as well. But yeah, I'll stop there and open it up for questions. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Laura. If you want to stop sharing your screen, we can now open up to questions. So I'd encourage you to just pop your questions into the chat box, or just indicate that you want to ask a question, then I can channel them. And I'll invite you, as I said at the start, if you're okay with that, to unmute and show your video and directly ask the question. And if you can't do it, just let me know, and I can channel the question. So I'll kick off, Laura. The stuff you showed there is fascinating in terms of forest biomass, but clearly there's lots of really useful information there on forest structure. And have you begun, or any of your team begun, to look at patterns of forest structure and what information comes through there about? And also I'm thinking, say, cryptic degradation and processes like that may become more visible through these waveform ones. Is there any avenues being explored there?
Sure. So we have, I guess it sort of depends what structure you're talking about, right? So of course you get a lot of different structural metrics from those waveforms, and there's so much to jump into and analyze. We do have official products for not only the relative height metrics, which I described today, but for canopy cover and LAI and foliage height diversity. So there are other actual structural descriptors that will be in the products themselves. But then in terms of analyzing those from sort of an ecological perspective, that's super kind of early days, right? So we've had a little bit of work. Some people on the science team are interested in looking at sort of structural diversity across a landscape with GEDI, but most of that research has been focused on kind of simulated GEDI data sets. So it's only kind of now that people are diving into the on-orbit data, now that it's finally out there in the public domain. So yeah, I think kind of the sky's the limit, but there's not a lot of kind of early analysis that's out thus far.
I'll just sneak in one quick question there. There's a nice question pouring in. And this is you're emphasizing this tropical emission, but I noticed that Oxford sits right at the 51.75 degrees, so right at the northern end of your periphery. Are there, once you get to the outer range of the ISS orbital range, are there any issues with the data there in terms of distortion and field of view effects, or is it pretty reliable even up here?
It's actually more reliable in that there's a denser sample. So with the way that the ISS orbit works, it just happens to be over those. It's essentially, it like turns around at around 52 degrees north. So you get way richer, denser samples right around that latitudinal band. So, you know, our colleagues on Vancouver Island have like this amazing map compared to some places in the tropics. And actually at Witham Woods, John Armstrong on the GEDI team was looking at some of the phenological kind of signals in GEDI, in actual on-orbit GEDI data, to see if you could see some sort of time series that matched structural phenology. And he was able to do that there because you do have a richer sample of the landscape up at that exact latitudinal band. So in some ways, Oxford's kind of data blessed from GEDI.
I'd love to hear more about that offline, because that's a site that we're doing a lot of work at. Great. Okay, so I'll just open up to the audience, and Nico is just mentioning data. So Agnieszka, you've got a question. Would you like to pose that question directly?
So the question is actually why this very successful mission ever ends. Because
well, you have a question later. Yeah, Nico, go ahead. Yeah. So
it looks like it produces great amount of data, but I mean, is there so little spatial overlap between the different circles that you don't have long-term trajectories that you expect? Or is it just a matter of funding, or why do these missions end so soon, like after just a few years?
Yeah, okay, so I mean, that's an excellent and actually very timely question. So GEDI is a little bit unique because it's on the International Space Station. So it's almost the difference between like renting an apartment versus buying a house. So our lease is going to end, and we're trying to renegotiate a longer lease, right? Ideally, the instrument could stay up there until the lasers fail, and at some point, the lasers are not going to last forever, but they could last up to maybe 7 years, or who knows, even longer. It depends on stuff goes wrong in space sometimes. But the original mission was for 2 years, and that was as long as the kind of lease on the ISS had been negotiated. Now we're looking like we're going to be able to at least stay up until late 2022 and hopefully longer. But negotiations are going on literally, as we speak at NASA, because there are other instruments that want a spot on the ISS. You don't have to have that trade-off if you have your own satellite. So ISAT-2, for example, is on a free-flying satellite. It'll just stay up there until it runs out of fuel or the lasers die. So it could be up there for, a decade and still be collecting good data. And hopefully GEDI will stay up in orbit as long as possible.
Thanks.
Okay. Agnieszka, are you there to ask a question? If not, I'll ask. There's a question basically about seasonality and leaf on and leaf off, what effects that has in your interpretation of first returns and last returns, etc.
Hi, darling.
Sure. So yeah, no, that's a really good question. So absolutely, it makes a big difference. From a biomass perspective, those relative height metrics are very sensitive to canopy cover, right? So for the exact same forest biomass, if you're in sort of like peak leaf on flushed out condition, you're going to get different relative height metrics than after senescence, when you don't have the foliage bulk in the canopy. So for biomass, we limit everything to leaf on. So we've trained our data with LiDAR that was collected during leaf on conditions, and all of our models are to be predicted on leaf on data. Whether we can create separate models that are leaf off models and apply them to leaf off data to get even more data for our biomass products, that's sort of a research question, but we've limited everything to leaf on because there is a really big difference in the structure, in the waveforms. The waveforms look different if it's leaf on versus leaf off. So that's a good question.
Great. Okay, Christopher Phillipson, you have a question?
Thank you. That was a brilliant talk, Laura. Thank you very much. It really filled in lots of the gaps in my knowledge, so I'm feeling much more like I know what's going on. So when I've had my toes involved in biomass missions using airborne LiDAR, then we used the LiDAR to choose places to put in plots specifically to where we thought there was more error in the regression. So at these very high biomass areas where essentially people didn't believe that were the case, it's like, okay, great, we can do some more field work before we publish this. So Christmas is coming up, and if you had a wish list for what you would ask collaborators that have field teams in different parts of the world with their boots on, ready to start measuring, and helicopters and planes ready to start collecting airborne LiDAR, what would you ask for?
That's the best question ever. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so there is a little bit of a nuance about GEDI, right? So one of the reasons that we didn't go out into the woods and like try and measure all these plots was because logistically we just didn't have, you know, the budget or the time to do that. But another reason is that there is geolocation uncertainty in the waveform locations themselves. So right now, the waveforms you're looking at online have kind of nominally like a 10-meter geolocation uncertainty. So if you put in a field plot without any airborne LiDAR, you put in just a field plot because you're like, this is the lat long that NASA says this waveform will exist in, it could be off, you know, like 10 meters or even more than that. So you might be putting the field plot in the wrong spot. So the number one consideration is not to just put in a little plot, but if at all possible, collect airborne LiDAR, even if it's drone LiDAR, because you can use the airborne LiDAR to correct for the geolocation uncertainty of GEDI. So you can actually change where the GEDI waveform, like you can fix the location, remove the geolocation uncertainty, and then you can actually relate it to the plots directly. So there is a little bit of a nuance there that just field data is going to be a little problematic. But if you have field data and airborne LiDAR, like that's the dream. And then spatially, really we have an issue in Asia in general, Central Asia in particular. But then yeah, it's, I mean, you can kind of see the map. So I'm the most concerned about Asia, but certainly you know, in high biomass forests, because there's so much variability there. I'm personally really interested in dense carbon forests, so that's a little bit of a personal bias. But yeah, I would say Asia for sure, and then across environmental gradients, especially in high biomass forests, kind of across the board. But if you can get the airborne LiDAR component, that's going to be kind of critical to doing a linking of the field plot to the GEDI waveforms.
Okay, that's a brilliant answer. Thank you very much. So yeah, we put in as big plots as possible on the footprints to try and avoid the geolocation issue. And for the ones in Asia, we already have the airborne LiDAR. So sounds like I should chat to you further about that.
Please do. That sounds great.
Thanks.
Okay. And Alex, you've got a couple of questions there. Do you want to pose those? We can't hear you. You're not muted, but maybe you have a problem with your microphone. Okay, I can ask those questions. I think the first one's pretty straightforward. If the area is cloudy at the time of acquisition, then GEDI is not available for that spot in time. That's correct, is it?
Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, can't get through that.
The second one, I think you're just announcing you have some forest inventory data from Honduras.
Okay.
And looking for collaborators that are interested in using GEDI ISAT with these data. Okay, so it's flagged up. Okay, so we'll move on. Guillermo, you have a question? Are you there? If not, I'll channel that question. GLASS could not reliably estimate canopy height and slopes greater than 5%. Has this been assessed for GEDI or ISAT as an issue?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And that was actually one of the mission design criteria. So the large issue with GLASS was just that when you went to that larger spatial resolution, like that waveform was kind of 65-meter diameter footprint, right? So the ground signal kind of blended into the canopy signal over steep slopes. So GEDI is higher spatial resolution largely to get over that issue, so that you just don't get as much, even over a steep slope. Yes, you're going to get, you know, a spreading out of the ground portion of that signal, and it will, like over steep slopes, we're going to have higher uncertainties than over completely flat slopes. But because the footprint is so much smaller, that was largely to overcome that. So we're not going to have nearly as big an issue with slopes with GEDI as we will as we did with GLASS. And then for ISAT 2, it's a little bit different. For ISAT 2, it's less sensitive to slope than it is to canopy cover. So if you have a steep slope under an area of dense cover where you're not necessarily going to be resolving the ground really well, then you're essentially you'll have higher uncertainty in places that have steep slopes and dense canopies. But if you have a relatively sparse canopy, ISAT 2 should be able to see the ground quite nicely. So I don't know if that answered your question. I don't have like the actual, you know, quantitative answers. We have some based on simulations that I don't have off the top of my head. You can see Steve Hancock's paper. for that, but we haven't done that assessment on orbit data yet.
Great, thanks. Okay, Dennis Aldo was just asking simply, would the slides from this talk be available at all, or are they?
I mean, sure. I think I could do that. I think it's going to be on YouTube, right? So
The video presentation will be on YouTube as well. But if you're happy to make them available, if you send them to me, I could put.
Yeah. There's nothing in there that can't be shared. So.
Okay.
Yeah, no, they're a very nice presentation. The other thing which would be useful, it may be in the slide set, I'm not sure, is the actual URLs of the data portals. I don't know if they will come up easily on a search engine, or if that could be good.
Yeah, so a little bit of like not a mission confession, but a lot of people have had a little bit of difficulty accessing GEDI data. So in the first release of the data, these are all accessible through the NASA DAX, but you can go to NASA Earth Data Search is probably the easiest way to find everything, all the NASA data in the world. And then you can just search for GEDI, so NASA Earth Data Search. But there was a little bit of missing metadata in the GEDI files when they got sent over to the DAX that made it difficult to spatially query the data. So if you put in a bounding box in NASA Earth Data Search, like you would search for any other data set, sometimes it shows you that you have no data. So I often get emails from people being like, there's no data over this huge country. And I'm like, no, there is. It's just the way that the metadata currently is. So that's going to be fixed in the next release of the data, which will be early next year. So hopefully they'll be much easier to access. Right now, it's difficult to find what data is actually useful, and people are having to download like massive orbits just to get like some little small chunk of data. So it is a little bit cumbersome at the moment, but that will be resolved just in the next few months when the release 2 of the data products goes online. So apologies to anyone who's experienced that difficulty. There are some new tools to do the spatial subsetting that are provided by the LPDAC where the data currently is, but there's like a little bit of cumbersome stuff there. So I'm happy to maybe send to Yadvinder like kind of a summary of how to access the data. It's not in the slide deck.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be very useful. I had another little question, if I could sneak it in, which was the returns from below ground level. What do those represent in reality?
So for GEDI, they're not below ground. It's just that the GEDI laser pulse is essentially like a Gaussian pulse of energy shooting toward the ground. So if you had a completely flat ground with no canopy over it, the waveform would still be a Gaussian waveform, with the center of that waveform being the elevation of the ground, and then waveform energy being returned. It looks like below and above the ground, but really that's just because the original pulse is a Gaussian that comes kind of as a sheet of energy down. So all of the returns will have some sort of Gaussian type distribution that represents the ground signal. So anything that looks like below ground, it's not below ground, it's just that shape.
Good. Thanks very much.
Just in response to the previous question, I noticed Cole Kriebels helpfully put a PDF in the chat, link in the chat.
Oh, is Cole here? Great. Yes, perfect.
How to query subset GEDI data. So you may want to download that PDF if you want to have a walkthrough guide.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Cole.
Yep.
Adrian Pasquale, Lance, you have a question?
Thank you for the talk, Laura. And it's good to hear from you some words on co-registration, because that's an issue that we experienced in one paper that is coming out in Spain. We were comparing GEDI, LiDAR, and NFI data. And we had to disregard many GEDI shots because of the co-registration accuracy. So of course, if you build or you have some very large plots, you mitigate that 8 to 10 meters displacement in the X and Y, but then the plots are more expensive. So you say that somehow you can match, like in a moving window, saying, okay, you have the full print of the GEDI, and then you have the continuous cover of LiDAR behind. How can you do that matching if you only have for that area the beam of that specifically location? How can you do that?
Right. So you don't do it for just a single waveform. You do it for like the entire GEDI track. So it's using this method of like essentially bullseye plots where you shift them around until you maximize the the correlation between not just one waveform, right? Because then you would just match it to something, but the entire orbit gets kind of fixed to the airborne LiDAR map. Or if you had a really huge STEM map, I think you could do the same thing there, but the airborne LiDAR is a lot easier. I'm not the expert in that. So if you want to send me an email, I can connect you with the people who have the methods, but John Armston on the team has done a lot of that, and Michelle Houghton and Brian Blair at Goddard as well.
Yeah, we have a paper coming out soon on that, so I will send it to you and then we can talk. But I think that's quite important, because somehow we need to not disregard all the GEDI information that we have, but trying to utilize that. So that's very nice to hear from you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question.
Right. Okay, Gwilym Rowlands, you have a question?
Hi, Avinda. Hi, everybody. I feel a little bit of an interloper here because I'm a marine remote sensor, so I tend to use remote sensing in marine environments. So your analysis looking at protected areas kind of spoke to me a little bit. And I know that when we look at these things in marine areas, in particular, look at biomass or productivity, as we often look at biodiversity, we often find, of course, that people put those protected areas precisely in the areas that have high biomass or high levels of biodiversity. So I'm wondering how you account for that in your analysis. And of course, some protected areas would have been protected for hundreds of years. I don't know anything really about the Amazon, but others may only be protected for a short while, which in this, in the span of a tree or something, I imagine is fairly insignificant. So I'm just curious how you account for all of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's an excellent question. It's something we've grappled with as well. So that for that project, really, that's where the matching comes in. So we're matching based on things that, like, places that should be similar based on baseline conditions. So I think we're doing the matching based on year 2000 conditions, where it was the same canopy cover in year 2000. It was the same climate, soils, the same distance to, like, theoretically the same sort of human influence. So theoretically, these should be the same. So if you're looking at like a high biomass protected area, theoretically you're matching that to a place that should have high biomass as well, according to, like every other covariate other than forest structure itself. So that's how we've done the control, is by doing that matching of a suite of covariates that we think would govern biomass independently of it being a protected area. Hopefully that will be sufficient, but I mean, it's a good question, and that's why we did the matching based on like baseline year, to allow kind of some sort of signal after that baseline to show up in the data. But it's pretty early days in that analysis. So, yeah, it's hopefully that matching accounts for that question, but it definitely is something that we've raised as well.
Great. All right. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, Yujia. Yujia Zhang. So Yuji asks about, has a question around the benefits of transferring the discrete LiDAR measures into waveforms instead of directly comparing the height differences of the two.
Okay, I'm not entirely sure. I'll try to answer this. So essentially, we wanted to make the airborne LiDAR look like GEDI, because waveforms are not, like, if you just took maximum height from the airborne LiDAR, that would match the maximum height from a simulated waveform, but any of the other structural metrics from the waveform won't be the exact same as from discrete return LiDAR. So if we wanted to make biomass models just as a function of maximum height, then I think that approach of just taking maximum height, of LiDAR over a field plot would be fine. But there's so much other information content in the waveforms. So we needed to simulate those waveforms to pull out similar structural metrics, or hopefully nearly identical structural metrics in the simulated waveforms as we'll have in on-orbit data, because we're taking our models that we fit with the simulated data and of course applying them to the on-orbit data. So we needed to make that transferable. I hope I interpreted that question correctly.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Ali, you have a question?
Hi, yeah, hi, Laura. Thanks for the really great talk. I've been working with some folks who are interested in doing kind of global comparisons and stuff, but my impression is that there's some issues with the version 1 data, some concerns you guys have about yeah, just quality stuff that you're working out of the data now that hopefully will be cleaned up in version 2. I was wondering if you could either correct me or elaborate.
Sure. Okay. So there's no, I mean, like the data is going to get better and better as we move forward. The main differences in version 2 compared to version 1 are that we're improving the geolocation. So a lot of those uncertainties when you're trying to match plots to the on-orbit stuff, hopefully those geolocations will uncertainty will reduce, and that's just something that will get better over time. But then the main kind of information improvement is that for each of those waveforms, you have somewhere where you're fitting the elevation. So it's like the ground signal in those waveforms, and that there are different algorithms to apply to waveforms to estimate where the ground is. There are different approaches. And so for version 1, we just picked one approach. And this is not work that I'm leading. This is being led by John Armston and Michelle Houghton and others on the GEDI team. But there's just one approach that's been blanket applied for version 1. For version 2, they're doing this optimization of picking the different ground finding algorithm using some kind of fancier techniques to kind of optimize that ground selection as a function of where in the world you are, what type of canopy you're under. So that will really improve the relative height metrics above the ground, because of course, if you get the ground wrong, then you're going to get the canopy height wrong, right? So as that ground selection improves and gets optimized, which I really do think there will be a big improvement for version 2, all of the other metrics will improve as well.
Cool.
I think those are the main 2 improvements. Yeah, geolocation and ground finding.
And do you think that ground issue would lead to bias across regions potentially? Should we be cautious using version 1 when we're kind of making conclusions about these things?
Yeah, I would be cautious, particularly in dense canopies. So, I mean, the ground finding's pretty, if you have like an open canopy, like the ground's going to be where the ground is. It's pretty simple. If you have a steep slope, it gets a little more complicated. If you have a dense canopy, that's where the ground signal is pretty weak. So it's more sensitive to that algorithm selection. And so if you're looking in like the dense tropics, be a little bit cautious. And it's only like a few months away, right? So, you might want to be cautious, I think. But you can also look at the waveforms, right? So all of the other algorithm selection settings are in the existing products. They're just not like the default. So if you dig into the products a little bit, you get different sets of RH metrics that are from the other ground finding selection. And if you look at a waveform and you're like, oh yeah, the ground is absolutely getting selected wrong, there are other options right now, or you could just wait a couple months.
Cool, thank you.
Great. Okay, Sylvie?
Yes, hello. Good evening. Thank you very much for this presentation. It was very interesting. I had a short question about the coverage laser, and I was wondering if the power was sufficient to reach the ground in a tropical forest, because the emitted pulse is quite long and the power is not so high. So I was wondering if they could be usable for biomass estimation or hydrotravel.
That's an excellent question. And actually, I should have said that in my talk. So for the coverage laser, which, it's like a less powerful laser, as Sylvie just said, it is going to be more sensitive to noise in particular. For biomass, we are not going to be using the coverage beam that was collected during daytime conditions in dense canopy cover situations. So that's where, like when you have, obviously we have a lot of, background solar noise happening during the day. So during the day, you're not going to have as clean a signal as during the night. So we're using the cover beam acquired during the night, but we're not using the cover beam at this point acquired during the day over dense canopies for our biomass estimation. This will continue to be refined as we move forward, but yeah, so if you have a place that has a lot of power beam data, I would say the power beam is quite reliable across the board, day and night. But the coverage lasers, you might want to filter out the coverage lasers that were acquired during the day if you want to maximize your signal to noise.
And I have also another question. For the new release, that means that we'll have to download all the data set. Because it's very, very long to download for 1 hour.
Yes, but I think because the metadata will also be like the metadata will be fixed. So if you're just looking at some spatial domain, it'll be a lot easier to pull the data for that spatial domain. And you know, Cole, who's on the line, can speak to that more as well. But you know, if you were only interested in one country and you've had to download the entire globe and then subset it, you don't have to go through that process again with the updated data. You can actually do spatial subsetting a little bit more easily, I think, in the new version. But yeah, that's more of a question for the DAX than for the science team. Sorry.
But it will still be the same format.
Yes, it'll be the same format. Yeah, they'll be HDF5 files. Yeah.
We are looking forward for this this new version. Thank you very much.
Okay, Shyam, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah. Thank you for a nice talk. I'm just wondering, although I'm not very expert of this field, so what should be your plot size for the ground data? Because I thought Asia is missing in a ground data. So if some of my colleagues want to contribute to collaborate with you, so what should be your plot size for the ground data to collect the biomass?
Sure. No, thank you. I think that's a really good question. And there are kind of two different answers, one from a GEDI perspective, and then one from kind of like a biomass mapping perspective in general. Yeah. If you're making designs for doing new field measurements, I would really strongly encourage you to go as big as you can for plots. You know, in the tropics in particular, I'd say like minimum 1/4 hectare, but ideally, you know, big plots 1 hectare. And that's not only for GEDI. So obviously we have some geolocation uncertainty, and you know, if you get bigger plots, then it's more likely that the shot will actually be in the plot. But also as we move toward trying to get a sort of reference system for all of these different biomass products that are coming out there, a bigger plot, and it has lower uncertainties in your estimation of biomass, the bigger the plot you go. But if you have the plot that's large, that has either a stem map of the locations of the trees or subplots, then it allows not only GEDI, but also all of the other biomass relevant missions to use that plot data. So that's kind of our general sort of recommendation if you're designing this, is to go at least 1/4 hectare, ideally 1 hectare plots, and if possible with airborne LiDAR as well. But of course, that's, you know, a different question.
So do you have some set protocol for these kind of the things, so people can have a, you know, the at least a common protocol for this?
Yeah.
So anyone
so
is
Sorry. So that CEOS biomass protocol that I referenced in the talk, that's guidance like for a lot more than just collecting field data, but it has the general guidance for kind of our recommendations for the type of data to collect and the plot sizes, and then also links to standardized protocols through different forest plot networks that kind of adhere already to those general community recommendations. So I'm happy to circulate a link to that as well. I don't think I can pull it up and put it in the chat, but maybe if I can email Yadvinder a little bit more follow-up information.
I know a lot of my colleagues in India, because the ISRO, Indian Space Organization, is doing a lot of good work on that field. Maybe they may be having this kind of the data. Yeah,
we ISRO has been really supportive of that effort. So they already have contributed to that joint protocol, and they have a copy of it, I believe. But it's online as well, so it's open for public comment, and we'd be happy to circulate that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, and we have a question from Jean-Pierre.
Yeah, it was according to the georeferencing. As you said, if you take a bunch of footprint, then you can minimize the differences. But how stable are those along the track or between tracks? For how long is that a rigid scheme that is followed, or is there some kind of moving thing?
No, that's a really good question. I don't want to misanswer, because this is not something that I am super actively engaged in. I believe that it corrects the geolocation of the entire orbit. So at least for, you know, it should be, you know, all of the tracks in the orbit. Well, it depends kind of how big the LiDAR coverage is, but I believe it's that whole orbit will be corrected. But I don't know for sure, and I haven't actually done that myself. So I would recommend, I think John Armston's probably the leading expert in actually doing that, because he's been doing a lot of that work for doing some on-orbit JEDI assessment. So I'm happy to put you in touch with him. But I believe it's, it's not just correcting like locally, it corrects the orbit
It's pretty
geolocation.
stable then. There's no storm or whatever that could shake the thing.
I mean, it's stable up to a point, right? Like, so the ISS jitters around. There's these astronauts bonking around in the ISS jittering it, but no, it should be stable for at least quite a while. But again, I don't want to like misspeak and say the wrong number here, so I don't know. But it's not just a local correction; it's supposed to correct the whole orbit.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thanks. Cole, you've got a couple of very useful comments there about querying the version 2 data. Would you like to switch on your mic and just talk to them directly?
Yeah, so if anyone wants to look in the chat, I posted a couple links, but so basically kind of to reiterate what Laura has said, so the version 2 data will be split into suborbit granules, which can be spatially queried in something like Earth Data Search Client, which will already make it smaller files to deal with. But additionally, there will be the ability to subset data spatially and by specific layers. So, there's, hundreds to thousands of layers in the GEDI files, but maybe you only want RH98. You can just pluck out that layer and then submit a request, and it will return just those layers that you're interested in, which should greatly reduce, the current status where you have to download the entire full orbit granule. So that should really help out on downloads and speed. And then additionally, we have an application called Appears, which is all of our raster products. We serve up spatio-temporal and band and layer subsetting for. And the idea is that with GEDI version 2, we're going to get those added into Appears as well. So you could request, let's say, Landsat ARD and MODIS data and GEDI data all from the same platform, and get it subset to just the specific data you're interested in. And I did put a link to our listserv if you guys want to sign up for that. That will let you know when we announce version 2 release, when it's added to Appears, and any other additional support that we may provide. And of course, I think Laura had already posted to the GEDI Knights Twitter account is a great resource for seeing when those things come to fruition as well.
Thank you. Thanks for also for just posting up all that supporting material. It's very helpful. Okay, Vishal, you have a question. I don't think it's quite complete there. Vishal, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Laura, for the brilliant presentation. So one of the things that you talked about was the terrestrial laser scanner being a substitute for the manual field measurements. So have you sort of found, did you do any sort of study where you sort of compared the GEDI data against the laser scanner, and do you think that it can be a sort of substitute for your manual field measurements?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I would say at this point, it's too early to substitute it entirely. I would recommend it more as an augmentation. So it's a lot more information content structurally comes from the TLS than from the sort of traditional measurements, but I don't think the traditional measurements should be replaced. But yeah, so we've done, I think the main kind of benefit you can get from TLS is actually and it's very early days, but to actually try and improve those allometric models by creating those models with a much larger sample size of non-destructively harvest forests. So some work from Kim Calders, from Matt Disney, et cetera, in the TLS community have really been paving the way toward this, but hopefully we can have improved allometric models so that our estimates of biomass in the field can then, even if you only had, you didn't have a TLS with you, if you could apply a new allometric model that was fit using like way more non-destructively harvested trees, hopefully that would improve the field estimate. So we're actually, as part of the new GEDI science team grant that we're working on, that's one of the things we're specifically going to be addressing, particularly for carbon-rich forests, is looking at our current GEDI database, which is all like there's not sort of TLS allometries in there. It's all sort of these traditional generalized allometries. Seeing if we swap in the TLS-based allometries, if all of a sudden our models get much more accurate, then I think that will really kind of guide us toward like, okay, yes, absolutely, we need to, improve these. Or if we see even larger uncertainties when we've swapped in for the TLS allometries, that will be telling too. So that's something I'm actually really excited about and looking forward to. I'm hoping that the uncertainties go down with those TLS allometries, but really it's like time will tell.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. And Solvik? You there? If I'll, so Solvik asks, do you think a GEDI can be used to estimate LAI?
Yes, absolutely. And there's actually an LAI product. So this is in the L2B product, the level 2B product. There are estimates of LAI at the footprint level already. So please do check that out. That's work led by Hao Tang and John Armston on the GEDI science team.
And just to follow up on that, how validated is that product? Has it been, how are you going about validating it or calibrating?
So he's been doing a bunch of work using terrestrial laser scanning, actually, for validation of that algorithm. I don't actually know the details offhand, but they've done a lot of work on that. So yeah, I think that's a really cool product. There's more than just LAI in there. There's like foliage height diversity, canopy cover, etc. in the L2B product, but that's all being validated with airborne LiDAR and terrestrial laser scanning.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I think we've come to the end of the questions there. But thank you, Laura, for handling quite a large number of questions there. So it's just, I think it just shows the level of interest in this product. I think we've also had you come and present at a very nice time where we just seem to be on the edge of this release and accessibility of the data over the coming year. And I think a lot of people are very excited to see what they can do with the data and how to use it. So it's great to have you and Cole there as a sidekick to actually help us talk us through how to interpret and use and access these data. So I look forward to what we do over the coming years.
No, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
Feel free to unmute and give a live round of applause. I always like the sound.
Hopefully we can all see each other in person sometime soon.
Great, so thanks very much. As I mentioned, we'll be posting this talk onto YouTube, and I'll send around a link on Twitter. And I'll try and, if there are any particular links, I'll try and stick them into the description of the talk on YouTube as well, so you'll be able to access any relevant documents there as well.
All right, thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Thank you, and have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura.